A Vedic Reader for Students by Arthur A. Macdonell, first published in 1917. Preface. This reader is meant to be a companion volume to my Vedic Grammar for Students. It contains 30 hymns comprising just under 300 stanzas. These hymns have been taken exclusively from the Rig Veda, not only because that Veda represents the earliest and most important phase of the sacred language and literature of India. Well, all the Vedas do, whether you say there are 4 or 7. But because the addition of specimens from the later Vedic literature with their divergences in speech and thought would tend to confuse the learner beginning the study of the oldest period. And the Rig Veda, it's not that old, but it represents over 40,000 years of tradition, and the Samaveda, Yajurveda, Atharva Veda is representing somewhere between 30 and 40,000 years, but it's less than 40,000 years. But the other, it's a little bit more. But the Sanskrit language and stuff like that kind of sort of has roots at that period too. So there's reason for the Sanskrit. But the Sanskrit's not, what is it, 4,000 years ago or something like that? All the books of the Rig Veda have been drawn upon except the 9th. The reason of this exception is that, though the whole of the 9th book practically consists of hymns addressed to Soma only, the hymn, which is in my opinion representing that entity best, occurs in another, the 8th book. Now, Soma is, at the very least, a symbol of consciousness. And there's an inscription that says, here's where we make the Soma, and what do they find there? Traces of marijuana, opium, and ephedra. You know, ephedra, the juice from the plant, and the opium being the sap. But there's also reference of those red mushrooms with the spots. Now these, you know, there are videos I have that kind of show better these various type of muscarum that grow around here. But only one's the one that they talk about, and there is some long-term issues with that. But I can get into how to have those experiences without the drugs as well, but that's another place. All the most important meters are represented, though no specimens of the rare and complex strophic measures could be given because none of the hymns composed in them seem to be suitable for the reader. I have also considered literary merit as far as possible in making the selection. As regards subject matter, each of the more important entities is represented by one hymn. So is it 33 entities first? Agni alone by 2. And Agni, of course. What does Agni mean? But fire. But it's representative of the will. So if you're talking about so you, through your will, your consciousness, and, you know, we get more of that too. There are besides a few hymns of different types. One is concerned with social life, 1034. One with magical ideas, 703. Two with cosmogony, 1090, 129. And 3 with eschatology, 1014, 15, 135. The selection thus forms a brief epitome of the Rig Veda, the earliest monument of Indian thought. The arrangement of the hymns follows their order in the text of the Rig Veda, as shown together with their respective entities and subjects in the table of contents, page 9. As the latter list is so short, the name of the entity addressed in any selected hymn can be found at once, but it also appears in its alphabetical order in the general index. Unlike all Sanskrit and Vedic chrestomathies known to me, the present work is intended primarily for students well acquainted with classical Sanskrit or beginners of Vedic, lacking the aid of a teacher with an adequate knowledge of the earliest period of the language and literature of India. It will, moreover, I think, be found to contain much detailed information useful even to more advanced students. Hence, difficult and obscure stanzas have never been omitted from any of the selected hymns because the notes here afford an opportunity of illustrating the methods of critical interpretation. For instance, pages 36, 47, 139 to 140, 152, 166, 175. In conjunction with my Vedic grammar for students, the reader aims at supplying all that is required for the complete understanding of the selections without reference to any other book. Each hymn is preceded by a special introduction describing briefly the entity or the subject with which it deals. The text of every stanza is printed in 3 different forms. The first is the Samhita text in Devanagari characters. Devanagari, okay. Exactly as handed down by tradition without change or emendation. Now, doesn't Sanskrit heard and refined? So, but each pada, or metrical line, is printed separately so as to exhibit the versification of the stanza. Then comes on the right half of the page of the traditional pada text, in which each word of the Samhita text is given separately without sandhi, and in which compounds and certain derivatives and case forms are analyzed. This is an important addition because the pada text, as nearly contemporary in origin with the Samhita text, furnishes us with the earliest interpretations within the sphere of phonetics and word formation of the Rig Veda. Next follows the transliterated Samhita text, in which, by the removal of vowel contractions, the resolution of semi-vowels, and the replacement of the original meter of the Rig Veda is restored, and by the use of punctuation, the sense is made clearer. The translation which follows is close, accounting for every word of the original, and is based on the critical method of interpretation. The notes furnish minute explanations of all matters concerned with grammar, meter, accent, syntax, and exegesis. The general introduction gives a concise account of the form and matter of the Rig Veda, describing in outline its arrangement, its language and meter, its religion and mythology, besides the critical method here applied to the interpretation of its hymns. The vocabulary supplements the translation and notes by giving the derivation of every word and in adding brackets the most obvious cognates from other Indo-European languages allied to Sanskrit, especially the Avestic, Greek, Latin, and English. I've added a copious general index for the purpose of enabling the student to utilize to the full summary of Vedic philology, which this book contains. Anyone who has worked his way carefully through the pages of the reader ought thus to have laid a solid foundation in Vedic scholarship and to be prepared for further studies on independent lines. Freedom from serious misprints is a matter of great importance in a book like this. Such freedom has, I trust, been achieved by the aid of my 2 friends, Dr. James Morrison, librarian of the Indian Institute, and my former pupil, Dr. A. Baridel Keith, Regius Professor of Sanskrit and Comparative Philology in the University of Edinburgh. In the course of this obliging task, Professor Keith has supplied me with a number of suggestions, the adoption of which has undoubtedly improved the notes in many points of detail. Balliol College, Oxford, October 22nd, 1917. And so there's going to be a longer introduction and Vedic hymns for Agni, Savitir, Maratas, Vishnu, Dyava, Prithvi, Indra, Rudra, Apam Napat, Mitra, Brahaspati, Ushas, Agni, Parjanya, Pushan, Apas, Mitra, Varuna, Surya, Asvina, Varuna, Mandukas, Visvadevas, Soma, Funeral Hymn, Pitras, Gambler, Purusha, Ratri, Himacration, Yama, Vata. And then I don't. Oh, maybe I'll share of the vocabulary. But I'm not reading out the index.